Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to today's video. This episode will guide you through the issues of the Uncanny X-Men published by Marvel Comics in 1981. Issue 144. Death. Within a year. That's what Jock Forester got told when he got diagnosed with cancer. Being a friend, the doctor was honest, and was being as gentle as she could when she told her old friend was going to die. Inoperable, incurable, ever-increasing enfeeblement of physical and mental faculties, and ever-increasing pain. And there is nothing anyone could do about it. Jock came here straight from the hospital, to the swamp he had known and loved since his childhood. He came here to make the most important decision of his life, namely to fight this disease and pray that some miracle might save him, or for things to end quickly and cleanly, and on his own time. Jock, however, never realized that the decision had already been made for him from the moment he entered this glade. Sitting there with his suitcase and wallet, which is holding a picture of his darling Mary, he is smoking a cigarette. He sheds a tear and holds his own head, asking why he couldn't have died together with Mary. He sure wanted to. He asks his Lord why now and why this way. It is so unfair to him. Unbeknownst to Jock, nearby, a monstrosity stirs in the shadows. This creature was once a biologist named Ted Sallis, who got transformed into this mindless and misshapen mockery of humanity called the Man-Thing by a freak accident. The Man-Thing is an empath, who responds to emotional resonances of beings around him. Negative and violent emotions cause him pain, with fear being the worst of them all. And right now, he is being drawn by Jock's sorrow, and he means to end it, and if necessary, by destroying the source. But as the Man-Thing is approaching Jock, he gets distracted by a patch of oily black smoke, which is swirling across the ground with its tendrils reaching towards Jock. This eldritch cloud is radiating an almost palpable aura of evil. And Jock, drowning in his sadness, responds. He picks up the revolver which he brought along with him. He checks the bullets, cocks the hammer, and as the black cloud is goading Jock to do it, he places the barrel on his temple. And as some form of serenity seems to overcome Jock, he utters a name. And the silence of the swamp gets shattered to bits by the sound of a gun going off. With Jock's body lying lifeless on the ground, a triumphant and malefic laughter follows, silencing every living thing within earshot again. The darkling cloud then flows caressingly over Jock's body, until it finally coalesces into the form of an entity known only as Despair, a demon who is the embodiment of ultimate evil. And its appearance triggers the Man-Thing, who can feel the psychic energy emanating from Despair, like white-hot lashes flaying him, and it goads him into instant murderous action. Slightly surprised by the Man-Thing's presence, Despair intercepts the Man-Thing's attack and calls him a fool. These two are no strangers to one another, and Despair tauntingly asks the Man-Thing if it forgot how their last meeting ended. How Despair almost destroyed the Man-Thing. Despair knows how whatever knows fear burns at the touch of the Man-Thing, and how he can make the Man-Thing feel absolute terror. Instantly exploding into flames, the Man-Thing drops to its knees, and Despair thrives on his pain. His death and Jock's death are but the first of many, despair says, because he feeds on living souls and his hunger is insatiable. And the demon then transforms himself and takes the form of Jock Forester. Midway down the west coast of Florida, at the fishing port of Shark Bay, we find a trawler called the Arcadia. After being at sea for a month, the ship returns with a full hold. A successful trip for its captain and her crew. The captain, Jock Forester, one of the best captains on the coast, who just so happens to be Jock Forester's only child, only recently added Scott Summers to a crew of fishermen. And Scott himself, up until 6 weeks ago, was also known as Cyclops, a mutant and team leader of the X-Men. When he took his leave of absence to deal with his personal grief, after he lost his beloved Jean Grey, his wanderings brought him to Shark Bay, where he signed up to become part of the Arcadia's crew. And he hasn't regretted that decision yet, even though he does feel somewhat as an outsider amidst his fellow crewmen. One of these men, Paolo, asks Scott why he's always wearing his sunglasses. And Scott tells him it's on doctor's orders. He tells him his eyes are unusually sensitive to light. When Paolo moves towards him, reaching out for his glasses and asking Scott if he could take a look at them, since he's never seen ones like his, Scott quickly grabs Paolo by the wrist and urgently tells him to keep away, knowing damn well that these ruby quartz lenses are the only things which keep his deadly optic blasts in check. Paolo, not understanding Scott's aggressive behavior, tells him it seems he needs to be taken down a peg or three, and that he's just the man to do it. Captain Elitis, leaving no room for a dispute like this between her crewmen, tells the two of them to break it up and to do it right now. Paolo, knowing his place, starts acting all innocent-like, saying he was just asking a civil question, didn't mean any harm, and wasn't looking for a fight either. He then asks his captain why she hired him anyways. Alita's response is that Scott's beautiful and that she's getting tired of seeing the rest of the guys' ugly mugs, and the whole crew bursts with laughter. A while later, after all the work has been done for the day, Alita invites Scott to come along with the rest of the crew for some food and beer. Hesitant at first, he gets convinced by Alita to come along. Once inside the bar, Alita gets told that her dad called and that she needs to call him back fast. Alita gets lost in her thoughts for a bit, thinking that what she said about Scott is actually true. She does think he's handsome, strong and gentle, yet she can tell that he's hurting inside. She likes him a lot, and maybe even a bit too much. Scott himself is lost in thoughts as well. He's reading a letter from home. A letter from the X-Men, the only real family he's ever known, and no matter where he goes, no matter what he does, he will never sever the ties that bind him with the team. The letter tells him what happened to Sprite during Christmas and what happened to the mansion because of that. In New York, the X-Men themselves are doing their best to clean up and repair the damage done to the mansion, using their mutant powers wherever it comes in handy. They have been doing so for weeks, and it seems like it's as messy as ever, according to Wolverine. He's trying to get his head around how one cute kid managed to cause so much damage. Nightcrawler teleports down to where the rest of the team is and informs Storm that he's done with the welding. Storm thanks him, and in her mind she wishes Kurt would be able to eliminate the stench of brimstone which accompanies his teleportations, because she finds the smell of it horrible. Warren gets telepathically hailed by the professor, and tells the rest that he has to go see him. When he arrives at Xavier's office, Xavier looks worried, and tells him that he's been tallying up all the money needed to repair the danger room, the hangar, the Blackbird aircraft, and the rest of the mansion, and the costs are huge. Warren, who is a multimillionaire, tells the professor that if it's money he needs, all he has to do is ask. Xavier is very appreciative and tells Warren that he's glad that he can count on him. Meanwhile, downstairs, the rest of the X-Men are joined by Kitty, who brings them sandwiches, figuring they might like some as they have been working all day. Colossus says that's very thoughtful of her, while Wolverine and Kurt are making fun of her, acting scared of her and calling her the tiny teen terror. Colossus can tell that she's taking them seriously and that she looks miserable. Pyotr tries to console her, saying that tact and good taste have never been their strong suits. But Kitty says that it's alright and that she can take it. Wolverine and Kurt keep pouring it on, trying to be funny, but it really does hurt Kitty's feelings. She gets upset, then drops the sandwiches on the floor and runs off, facing through the walls and telling Wolverine that she's sorry, that she did her best and didn't mean to smash everything, that maybe she should have just let that monster kill her. She makes her way through the walls of the mansion and runs outside, plowing through the snow and heading for the lakeshore behind the mansion. As she sniffs her nose, she notices the smell of brimstone. Nightcrawler shows up and tells her that he thought she might be cold and brought her a coat. Kitty thanks him and puts it on, yet asks him to leave her alone because she doesn't feel much for company at the moment. Kurt respects that and tells her that for what it's worth, he is sorry, and so is Wolverine, and that they never wanted to hurt her. She tells him she knows and that it's okay and that she's not hurt. Kurt adds that in reality they are all very proud of her. In fact, they couldn't be more proud of the way she handled herself, and that none of them could have done any better. As Kitty walks off, Kurt can tell that she hears him, but isn't listening to a word he's saying. He starts to wonder how he could have been so unthinking and so cruel to her, and he starts to doubt himself, thinking as to whether he actually meant to hurt Kitty unconsciously. Insecurities which Kurt will have to find the answers to sooner or later. Over at the tavern, Scott is being challenged to a game of 8-ball, and he gladly accepts. But first he wants to take a couple of practice shots. During his time with the X-Men, Scott has become an excellent marksman and he's getting ready to put these skills to use. The whole of the tavern is then suddenly distracted by a football game on the TV set, and this allows for Scott to secretly use his optic blast and aim for the cue ball instead, making sure that he hits the ball with just the right amount of force, making it so that all the other balls end up in their pockets, and the 8-ball ends up in the corner pocket as well, and this gets seen by one of the guys he was supposed to play against. Scott then mockingly says that he's all warmed up and suggests to start the actual game. But before the game starts, Lee walks up to Scott, telling him that she hates to interrupt, but her dad wants her to come over to his place and that she suspects something is wrong. She tells Scott that it will be an overnight trip and asks him if he would mind keeping her company. Scott tells her that of course he doesn't mind. Within the hour they are on an airboat traveling through the Everglades. Both of them are lost in thoughts. Elidis thinks how she was supposed to bring Paolo along, since he and her dad are old friends. Even though it was selfish of her to ask Scott to come along, she does feel comfortable and good with him, and she wants to get to know him better. And also, she wants him to get to know her better. As for Scott, he can feel that Lee is attracted to him, and he wishes he knew how to handle this situation better. He does not want to get involved with anyone. Not yet. When they arrive at the ancestral home, Scott is impressed. Lee tells him that her dad worked like a dog to give her mom and her a good life. But when the time came to reap the fruits of his hard labor, her mom passed away, something which her dad never got over. Her death left a void in his heart, a void which never had gotten filled by anything. Scott reacts by saying that he knows that feeling. When they step in the house, Lee yells out to her dad that she's home, and he steps out. He notices how his daughter looks well, even though she is a bit thin. Elidis says that she has been at sea, all work and no food. Elidis hugs her dad and asks how Pop has been doing. His response is that her Pop killed himself this morning. And as what Lee thought was her dad changes into the demon Despair, he tells her that he helped her dad to do just that. Lee yells out and gets slapped off the stairs by Despair. Scott only barely manages to catch her, and when Lee asks him what happened to her father, Scott tells her that he doesn't know, but that he suggests that they get out of there fast. But they quickly find out there's no way out. Despair tells them that they are now in his domain and they will leave when he's done with them, and no sooner than that. And as he says those words, Lee and Scott find out that all of reality warps inside out around them. The demon spells transforms Lee's ancestral home into a mile-high obsidian tower, which, like its master, radiates an aura so malign that both Scott and Lee can feel all their senses getting drowned in a miasma of pure despair. Despair then jumps in front of the two of them and tells them that now the fun begins. As Scott asks Despair who or what he is and what he wants with the both of them, the demon tells them his name and how he wants all the despair they are capable of giving, and he starts laughing. And as he laughs, Scott finds himself struck blind, deaf and dumb. And when his senses clear, he cannot believe where or who he is. He finds himself a child, inside an airplane with his parents and his little brother. He can hear his father telling his mother to get the kids into the chute, because even though his dad is an excellent pilot who maintained and remodeled this plane into an even more superb aircraft than it already was, it cannot withstand the attack it is undergoing. It is outmatched and struck down by powers far beyond that of ordinary humans. Scott, a grown man, screams as his 10-year-old younger self is reliving a most traumatic experience. Memories which had been locked away in his mind for half of his life. And as their mother pushes both boys out of the hatch of the plane with only one parachute, she tells them that her and their father will join them as fast as they can and that they love them both. But they will never follow. The plane explodes right after the boys got pushed out, and Scott hears the explosion but doesn't look back. What he does do is pull the ripcord, just how his father had taught him, and he wraps his arms and legs tightly around his baby brother Alex so that the shock of the canopy opening will not yank his brother out of his grasp. The parachute functions properly, but sadly, the flaming debris of the airplane sets the chute on fire and the kids fall to the ground harder than they were supposed to. And when Scott wakes up from the landing, he finds himself an adult again, remembering the entire traumatic experience. And somehow he is now wearing his X-Men costume, his old one, and he finds himself in an entirely different place. A place he has been before several years ago, namely the mountain headquarters of Larry Trask, the man who followed in his father's footsteps in creating a new line of deadly, mutant-hunting sentinels, and Scott wonders what is happening to him. He sees his old teammates, and they are all dead, apart from his brother Alex, the former X-Men named Havoc, and in the distance he can hear the murderers of his old teammates approaching. And as Havoc is lamenting the death of his lover Polaris, the Sentinels break through the walls, and Scott thinks he's going insane. These Sentinels look like the members of the current X-Men team, which makes no sense at all. Both brothers then unleash their mutant powers and start blasting at these robots, and the results are devastating. One by one the Sentinels get wrecked, but one of them catches Alex off guard and hits him from behind. And even though Scott blasts the final Sentinel, it is not in time, as he remains the only one standing. In his mind he remembers how all this makes no sense at all, and he realizes that someone must be playing tricks on his mind. And then he gets told by a voice coming from his brother that he's ignoring the obvious. And as Scott turns around, he can see the corpse of his brother coming back alive again, like some kind of zombie. And it tells Scott that he truly is mad. And then the corpses of the new X-Men members revive as well, telling Scott that it's entirely possible that their consciousness and souls have been transplanted into these Sentinels, and that by tearing through them, he himself has killed his former teammates. And as they start approaching Scott to return the favor, Scott starts screaming, as his friends start ripping him to pieces. But when the agony subsides and his eyes slowly open again, he finds himself in a different place once more. A place which is etched in his heart, mind and soul. This was the place where he and his deceased lover Jean Grey bonded on a telepathic level. Only moments before she died and then left him behind. Forever. In pain. He hears her voice and turns around and sees her. And he stands face to face with the missing part of his soul. And all of the doubts which he had about what's going on and the tricks which were being played on his mind are instantly gone. He believes it now, because he wants to believe. And as they embrace one another, they are suddenly inside a church. Right before they got separated, Scott had proposed to Jean, and she accepted. And as they walk the aisle, he is wearing a tuxedo over his costume. And Jean starts her metamorphosis from how he met her as Marvel Girl into Phoenix, and then from the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club into Dark Phoenix. And they have arrived at the moment of truth for Scott. This apparition of Jean asks Scott which incarnation of her he loved the best. And it tells him that he should be careful, because the wrong answer will cost him dearly, as it starts towering over Scott. He then answers stutteringly that he loved and actually still loves her. It then tells him that of course he does, and asks if they should continue with the marriage ceremony. Scott thinks to himself that this has to be a dream because he saw Jean die. However, she has died once before that and resurrected herself, so why wouldn't it happen again? And as Scott keeps on thinking about whether this is really Jean, the ceremony continues. It is led by Professor Xavier, with the X-Men in attendance, and Xavier pronounces them man and wife, and tells Cyclops that he may now kiss the bride. Jean then removes his visor, and Scott is confused by that, and she tells him she wants to see all of his face. She tells him to open his eyes and that nothing will happen. So he does what his bride tells him to do, and his worst nightmare then comes to pass, as his eye beams hit his wife with full force. He then rushes to her side and cradles the bloody pulp that had once been Jean Grey in his arms, trying to will life back into her shattered form. And then suddenly her corpse disappears and Cyclops' sobs are answered by laughter. Laughter coming from Despair, who tells Scott that he enjoyed toying with his mind, but he will now destroy it. Cyclops, who has known fear before, gets crushed by the irresistible power of despair. His mind and soul both shrivel, and as he is engulfed in terror, he runs. Without looking, he launches himself through the window, located halfway up Despire's mile-high tower, and all that he can pray for is that the fall will actually kill him. And with Scott's body lying on the ground below, Despair looks downwards at it from the window, thanking Scott for the entertainment he provided him with, and saying that he hopes his female companion will serve him just as well. For a while, Scott just lays there, balancing on the edge of oblivion, wanting to slip into the abyss. He does not want to give Despair that satisfaction, however, and eventually he wakes up. With his body still shaking with residual fear, he is not aware of the water close by, which seems to be bubbling ominously behind him. The Man-Thing emerges from it and slowly makes its way towards the source of fear. Fear present in Scott's body and mind, caused by despair, and Scott knows he can beat this feeling. He must beat this feeling, and at that moment, Scott can hear the Man-Thing approaching. Not only that, the smell of the stench it brings along as well. He immediately shifts from fright into fight mode, and is about to take off his glasses and use his optic blast to utterly destroy this monster which is approaching him. But then he asks himself what's wrong with him. Why does he allow panic to make him forget his training? Deep down, he knows that he should never unleash his eye-beams on anything other than a definite foe or a definite attack. And this creature is not after him at all. it's walking past him and heading for Despair's temple instead. Not sure whether the Man-Thing is going after Elidis or Despair, Scott knows that he has to follow it, even though the thought of going back in there scares him. Knowing that he will need absolute control over his optic blast, he grabs his costume from the bag he brought along. His ruby quartz visor will grant him all the control he needs. Without either one of them having entered Despair's temple, Scott can already hear Elidis screaming. The Man-Thing barges through the door with Cyclops right behind him. Lee is on the floor getting mentally tortured and tricked by the demon. Despair asks the Man-Thing if it will ever learn and attacks the moss creature with a blast which triggers the Man-Thing's own buried fears. An ever so small part of the Man-Thing is still human enough to recognize and acknowledge fear. And since whatever knows fear will burn at the Man-Thing's touch, the creature sets itself ablaze. And Cyclops, seeing the moss creature enduring pain, tries to help by firing at the demon which is causing the Man-Thing's agony. But Despair keeps on teleporting itself across the room, laughing sadistically while evading Cyclops' attacks and blasting the Man-Thing over and over again. Cyclops then tends to Elidis' unconscious body while still attacking the demon and asking him what he has done to her. Despair tells him that he's done the same to her as he's done to Cyclops himself, even though the demon does admit that Cyclops handled himself a lot better with what he threw at him. Despair mockingly tells Cyclops that even though his eye-beams may be effective against a mortal foe, he himself is an immortal, and physical forces cannot harm him. Despair then disappears, and while all of the surroundings are burning, Scott wonders if he has figured out what exactly Despair is after. What precisely this demon called Despair thrives on. Are the illusions of tragedy it creates supposed to create fear in its victims, or are they supposed to make the victims lose all hope? Scott thinks he's got it figured out and thinks about his most personal and painful memory. His first sight of the Dark Phoenix. He is gambling that his memory to this shocking moment will draw Despair out. And it does. But Scott's emotions, which come along with his memories, including fear, are so real that they attract the Man-Thing as well. Luckily, Scott manages to get a hold of Despair before the Man-Thing can reach him. And with Scott having figured out how the demon's powers work, they have no effect on him anymore. Scott, like any living thing, knows fear. But he doesn't let that fear rule his entire being. He does not despair. He then dares the demon, who keeps blasting at Scott, to break away from his grip. Despair keeps on using his powers on Scott, trying to break free, and is eventually successful. But not before the Man-Thing has reached him, inspired by the courage and strength emanating from Cyclops. The demon's powers are now useless against the swamp monster as well, and this knowledge triggers his own fear, which causes Despair to start burning at the touch of the Man-Thing, and it is tearing him apart. And the whole building is set ablaze as well. Cyclops then quickly picks up Elidis and blasts his way out. Once outside, Elidis regains consciousness and starts mumbling, and Scott tells her that she is safe now, and that she will be alright. Looking at the inferno where Lee's ancestral home once stood, Cyclops figures that if both Despair and the Man-Thing are still inside, they are surely both dead. Lee and Scott are both lucky to have escaped. Despair's fatal mistake was to attack Scott through his memories of Jean. He has faced the best and worst in humanity, and through her he learned the true meaning of courage and love. Yielding to despair would have been the ultimate denial and betrayal of that love, and Scott would have rather died than to let that happen. He gets back aboard the airboat and rushes Lee to the county hospital, where the doctors tell him that she will be fine, and Scott is glad to hear that. By dawn, the fire is out, and the Forester ancestral home is reduced to smoldering remains. But amidst its ashes, suddenly the Man-Thing rises, whole and unharmed. And even though he was trapped at the heart of the fire, which consumed both him and the mansion, Being created by science and sorcery and sustained by the swamp, this odd monstrosity wanders the earth again. Once again resurrected by the swamp, virtually immortal, as long as he remains within its vast confines. He pauses for a moment, seeking some sense of despair, but he finds none, and he then departs. And once the man-thing leaves, a soft and malefic laughter breaks the silence and echoes out across the face of the world. Thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. You can help growing this channel by liking, subscribing and sharing. This tells YouTube that the videos I'm making should be recommended to others and would be very much appreciated. See you next episode.